So, Magnus, I pressed the button without realizing I'd actually pressed the button, so I managed to mute us both before we.
That's a good start.
Oh dear! I'm out of practice of my live discussions. That's part of the problem. I think it's just one of those things. Anyway,
good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it is good, and I always laugh because I was once labelled. I think it was either the Duke Long was labelled as the Godfather. I think self-labelled the Godfather of PropTech.
Well, he is the Godfather, to be honest. I mean, that's not made up. He is a Godfather. He's right on that one too.
He literally is. I was once labelled, I think, the grandfather, which I took a little bit of offence of, the grandfather of PropTech. But I think in all reality,
me too.
Well, but then I was going to say that perhaps that means that you're probably the great grandfather, and I don't know what's worse.
No, that's true. 27 years in this area of the business life. It's pretty insane.
You are the man where sort of you existed before PropTech existed, but it really did kind of exist just without the label, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, so many people think that PropTech was invented with the hashtag on Twitter. I believe that was probably when the third, fourth, fifth wave started, and it's become so much bigger than it was before. But I mean, PropTech has been around since the 80s, or maybe even the 70s.
Of course, it was.
I mean, I actually met the other week. I met what I dubbed, and I have an argument with our friend at Metaprop with this, maybe not a friend, not an argument, just a discussion. Which one is the oldest PropTech company? I met with a Swedish firm.
So I think I know the answer.
1934.
No, before that.
Okay, that's good. 1934 is a pretty early company.
So go on. So who was that? 1934.
Big factor. Started with this. They are now international, 26 countries, including they just acquired, or the other year acquired Glenigan in UK, for example. So they're a listed company. Actually, there's a bid to unlist them, and the bid is €1 billion of worth. They were IPO'd 2 years back on a valuation of €1.6 billion. They are in 26 different countries globally. So they started with the founders started bicycle to different construction sites, collect data, and then resell it. Obviously not digital, but they went digital in the end of the 70s or early 80s.
What data were they collecting?
What construction sites are out there? Who is building? What are they building? What do they need? And so on. So today, if you are a supplier of doors or windows, you can get notified as soon as someone is planning to build a large office building or hospital or multifamily property. So as soon as that project, not when they start digging the hole in the ground, but way before that. So you can start to contact the architect and the construction firms, which will be listed on their site for the projects. So they can take it from there, and you can sell your services. Or if you are a property investor, you can figure out what's in the pipeline when it comes to new offices that will be hitting the market in 2, 3, 4 years. So it's a great service, brilliant service.
Yeah, it is, and it's funny. I mean, understanding who is behind what is it's been repeated time and time again. And funnily enough, I just saw one of the earlier PropTech founders in Johnny Britton at Landtech just bought Built ID, which was another company just similar to that in that sort of.
I still remember Jonathan running into him at probably one of the first Future of PropTechs.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
maybe
he's done a lot around that.
Great guy.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly knows what he's doing, and that in that early sort of tranche of that burst of enthusiasm around the technology space, he was one of them, which had product market fit. He, I think, of any of the early entrepreneurs that I met was probably one of the very few that is A, probably still around, B, has gone through all of the trials and tribulations of all of that sort of entrepreneurial journey. And he's a good guy. So I wish that combined force, because Savannah.
But there again, early. I respect what they've done, but they launched 2012, 13.
Yeah, no,
13,
I meant as in that early burst, because obviously what you would call peak PropTech in terms of all that massive burgeoning amount of companies that launched around the world in 2017, which was peak, sort of launch of a PropTech business. I'm talking about early in that wave, not earlier. But just to actually round that all off, I remember doing a little bit of work around the sort of the history of PropTech, and I remember looking, and I can't remember the name of the company, but it was in the smart home, smart building arena, and it was a business that had actually got acquired, and as a consequence, it sort of sat under a parent company, which was like a Chubb, like a proper security system, access control lock system to let people in. And I always found that interesting, because obviously it wasn't the original business back in the day of key in a lock and turning, but I always found it quite interesting in terms of the sort of the philosophy of technology evolution, because we think technology is all about sort of smart technology, but back in 18 whatever it was when this company originated, the key in the lock and the locking mechanism was obviously smart then. And I just think it all evolves. But anyway, we've gone down a rabbit hole before we've even started. First and foremost, thanks ever so much for coming on, and I'm sure we're going to have some far-reaching discussions, because and just for anybody who's watching the recording on this is all around the research that I'm doing with Dr. Amy Redmond around the book around digital transformation and innovation, and a real area of this, Magnus, just to sort of put the context in this. So when you look at companies that go on a transformation journey, a lot of people think it's only about the out and out technology or the philosophy of innovation. And there's actually, in a sort of what we're putting together as the thesis here, which is there's two areas. There's the people side, which is all your leadership, your culture of change. There is that as a mindset shift when you go through a transformation journey, and bringing people along on the journey with you, and all those sorts of things which I think are not discussed enough. And Amy, having a PhD in innovative leadership is very central to that side. And then you've got the practical aspects of transformation, and technology obviously is one of those things. There's no doubt about that. But the other angle, which keeps on cropping up in all of the transformation frameworks that you read about, and there's over 60 different transformation frameworks, but data is one of only 7 what they sort of call verticals, I suppose, within those frameworks that is consistent in every single framework that there is. And I know you've got quite a view on data, and as a consequence, I'm really keen on understanding your perspectives of the property data side, because I think you've been a part of that from the beginning. So perhaps could we just start with that as a background in terms of understanding Magnus, which maybe people know you for very, very many different reasons, and I certainly did. I don't know that data point, so it'd be really good to hear your perspectives on your own career in technology and data.
Yeah, I can start with my background that will maybe describe my views in a certain way. So I have a master in civil engineering, but I switched career roughly straight out of uni due to the fact that I actually found internet. And this sounds a bit ridiculous if you talk to my 2 daughters that can't even live life offline, which I think is a good idea. So in 97, I graduated with a master's degree, and I quite quickly I had to decide to go either classic construction route, Skanska, NCC, those kind of companies, or completely switch to the digital career. And there were PropTech around by that time, but it was pretty small businesses and hard to find, and I didn't really know what to look for because I never met them, so to say. So I spent a few years as an IT consultant, actually building billing software for telecom, and that was a really good training school, so to say, for software development, because that's really complicated. Nothing we do in commercial real estate is close to that complexity. Then I came across a company called Dacia, which had just at that point raised a little bit of money, or 6 million euros, and were really trying to take off. And I immediately decided this is where I want to work. And I managed to convince them to hire me. And 19 years later, I've spent all those years as head of product, and then we sold Dacia to RCA in New York, Real Capital Analytics, which then was sold to MSCI. So the old Dacia product is now a part of the MSCI real estate asset product suite. And I kept on going in the company group that was started and was owning Dacia over all those years, Stronghold Invest, which is a Swedish investment company. And we are focusing on business services and tech-enabled businesses in the built environment in Northern Europe. And our two biggest holdings, and where everything started, is Newsec, which is by far the largest commercial real estate consulting firm up here in the Nordics, having everything from strategy, advisory, capital markets, valuation strategy, and a massive division for property asset management. Just one number, they have 58 million square meters under management, only in the Nordics. So massive footprint up here. Then we have Niam, which is a private equity firm, focusing, as of today, it is multi-asset, but it's been for many, many years. Then the history is in commercial real estate. So they have a number of funds and been super successful since they started in 98. And I'm on the growth team at Stronghold Invest, which means that we are the team focusing on tech aspects, both internally in our portfolio companies and also looking to do direct investments in PropTech companies, which we've done for the last 10 years. We have a portfolio of roughly 10 PropTech companies, including one of yours back in the days. Indeed, Geneso.
Very, very early on.
So that's my background. So I worked, heavily with data, specifically property data and data from more, so to say, public sources. It could be national-owned land registers, but also buying data from consulting firms like real estate consulting firms. What is the market rent, market yield, and so on for different areas in the city. Flooding data, business data like company structures. So who is the ultimate owner for a specific company and so on. So I've spent a decent amount of my time looking at different data sources and how to use them and build a tool so it gets used. And then also building we launched in year 2000, probably one of the first online valuation DCF models for commercial real estate market. So that's like 23 years ago.
Let's go back to your early days with Dacia. I'm really interested in understanding what it was about Dacia, and this might be a relatively quick one. But what was it about Dacia that really made you think, actually, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna try that, and then spend 19 years there in the same role as head of product? So I'd love to know why you started there and how you saw.
Mean, to be honest, when I signed, I hardly knew what they were doing more than they were doing some internet product for the commercial real estate. And since I had my background in civil engineering, I wanted to do something in the built environment that has a big tech angle. And that's what I signed up for. And then I fall in love.
How did that evolve over the 19 years that you were there as head of product? Because you must have seen a lot of changes in the industry, and obviously what Dacia did, because obviously Dacia expanded. They went across as well. So there must have been a lot of changes and challenges you saw across the real estate market, across geographical boundaries. So what kept you going?
Just brief background on the product. It had actually started quite a few years before that as part of Newsec, the consulting firm, because in Sweden we had a massive real estate crisis in the mid-90s, which meant that quite a few of the banks were in trouble or deep trouble. And when the banking industry came out of that crisis, so to say, quite a few banks started to start internal projects when it comes to, okay, how do we actually underwrite a commercial real estate financing deal? And they quite quickly realized that pretty much every different branch in their organization were doing it slightly different. Some of their offices were doing it in very, very great way. Others were slightly more questionable. And being a very large firm like banks are, they tend to kind of flatten that curve. So to say that we want one way of doing this and everyone should do it the same way. And that project became actually a scope for building a tech product. And that was the start of Dacia. So it was purposely built for the underwriting process within banks. So when a landlord goes to a bank in Sweden, most of the banks, I would say 90% of all the cases, internally they will use Dacia to find basic information about the property, the owner, what's the total portfolio for that owner, and use the tool in Dacia to start with an assessment of the value, but then go through all the details to do a full proper DCF, which of course include to have updated data straight from the landlord to the bank personnel, upload the data and do their assumptions in the tool. So that's where it started. So the banks were the first users. Then it quickly took off among consultants, because consultants, and that could be strategy, valuation, capital markets. So they maybe have a new client, call them, and they say that they may be interested in finding an agent to sell their property. On the consultant side, could then quickly look up the property, see where it's located, the size, what is more in the same portfolio, what deals have happened in that city the last 6 months, and they could quite quickly find an assumption of the value, like on the back of the napkin times 10 kind of valuation. And so many, if you're a consultant, you quite often are thrown into cases where you maybe haven't the deepest knowledge. So yeah. Dacia could provide that very quickly and very easily.
So is it fair to say that really what Dacia created, and as a consequence, I might suggest this could be put across to any company or organization that builds a data strategy. You created a layer of structure, organization, and as a consequence, transparency on what was originally a very messy, unstructured set. Is that
exactly? For the first 10 years, we had no unique data whatsoever. Okay. We acquired data from the Swedish land register. We acquired data from the equivalent of Company House in UK. We acquired data from we started with Newsec, but then we added actually also competitors' market data. So what is the market rent? What's the market yield? What's the market vacancy in a specific sub-market of a city? So Stockholm was breaking up into maybe 100 different sub-markets from the different consulting firms. So the consulting firms themselves could do those sub-markets and then add data on a quarterly basis. And then the only thing we did compared to billing system for telecom was to take those data sets, cross-run them, and buy a very user-friendly and beautiful screen user interface. And then we packaged it, made it easy to sell, made it easy to buy, and made it, since this was in the early beginnings of the internet, and we actually started, the product was a client-server product to start with for 4 years, between 96 and year 2000. And then in year 2000, we changed everything and purely made it available through internet, which was like 10 years before SaaS as a term was invented. Dutch actually released its internet solution only 1 year after Salesforce launched their software as a service solution, which is considered to be one of the first software as a service companies. So, and then over the years, we started to create our own data sets through our own research, which is a way for a product company like that to, have a unique selling point.
So let's bring this to I suppose. No, I mean we can take it back to that time. How do you feel the real estate industry currently deals with the challenges around data?
Quite poorly still, but there's big pressure over the last maybe 18, 24 months to change that. And the reason is that real estate investors, if we put it that way, they have been so successful the last 20, 30 years. So why should they bother? The biggest, I mean, the really forward-leaning people have always used tools like Dacia or anything else to find I mean off-market deals, to analyze the market. I mean, we could drop a link later on. We had Matthew Richardson, nowadays founder and CEO of Income Analytics in out of Oxford in England. I've known him for many years, and he's a great person and very knowledgeable. He did a presentation in 2017 up here in Stockholm at a PropTech event we created, where he was talking about that real estate is actually, as a market, it's just about data in a way. But for many years, you could do it unstructured and not using databases. It came down pretty much to gut feeling, and that just over the years created input and insights you collected. I've obviously been a firm believer that you can do so much more when it comes to data, and you can be quicker in the market, you can find better off-market deals and so on if you use data in a structured way, and that has always slowly been growing as a use case. But the biggest and best thing, if you come with my background, I really like property data. I think the best thing ever happened to PropTech is everything around ESG, because that will be push it over the.
You're right. It's the carrot and it's the stick which will create and accelerate data strategy. And when I talked to you at the start around the fact that Amy's exploring the human side and I'm looking at the very sort of physical aspect or the structured asset of transformation, we've put that there are drivers, and drivers are productivity, affordability, and ultimately sustainability, ESG, SDGs, and they are driving both sides actually of the people and the sort of the structured debate around transformation. But I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there yet. I just want to try and understand the sort of the challenges that the industry have faced traditionally on data as an entity. And for example,
I don't think that I'm not sure they have had so much challenges. They've been pretty successful anyway.
Okay, so how should I rephrase that? Is that something around the challenge of understanding the value of the data that they have? Is that a better way?
I assume the challenge has been mostly for companies selling data solutions of some sort to convince the buyer that you should really use our tool to be quicker, to be faster.
I'm not sure I agree. I'm going to challenge it, because that speaks from a technology side, and I'm looking at it from a real estate side with the vast amounts of unstructured data, to use the term that you're bringing in, and not understanding the sorts of data that they collect, how they store it, how it's organized, and how they can make potential value out of it. So
Yeah, exactly. But they've been very successful without doing that. And
of course, because but hang on,
therefore it's never been really a problem for them.
But hang on, but isn't that because
it's been a missed opportunity?
Yes. So the product traditionally within the real estate market has been a physical asset. It hasn't necessarily been anything outside of that. And when you look at transformation, digital transformation and true digital transformation is about understanding where new profit pools exist and about exploiting existing business models. And if the existing business model is the physical asset, data is potentially a profit pool that hasn't been explored or exploited, for that matter, to maximize the asset itself. So again, I come back to the challenge of why has there been a problem? Is there a problem with data in the past, or is it simply that the last 5 to 10 years, last 5 years has really shown us that the data that exists from our buildings is actually incredibly valuable, and it is a missed opportunity? So let me just try and rephrase the question to make it right. What is different? Oh no, because we're just going to go down a sustainability angle here. What?
No, I think there's just a kind of refocus. What I'm saying there is that we who work with data and see the possibilities, what you can do with data, or it doesn't need to be just the data around a specific physical building. It could be data on the tenants to foresee the potential payment of the upcoming invoices for the tenants. It could be understanding the footfall of people around an area. There's so much data which many of us, you could call us tech people or whatever, have seen that this must make sense for an investor to use. But it's been a big tough battle over the last 30 years to sell products like that. Obviously, for every year, more and more data is available. That's another story. But he's been slightly been growing. And for example, in Sweden or Finland, I would say it's also so in UK. It's a product like Dacia. There are quite a few different ones nowadays. I'm pretty sure most of the different, at least forward-leaning companies use them. In Sweden, they maybe have pushing 1,500 different companies using their service in the commercial real estate market, including banks and so on. But in the beginning, it was the early adopters, the ones who saw that, hold on a minute, here's an alternative way to find an off-market deal instead of standing on a yacht at maybe in Cannes and just waiting for a broker to approach them. And when people start to understand that you can use that tool too, it's suddenly kind of everyone needs to go that route in a way, if it's a good product, obviously. But nowadays, in certain areas, for example, ESG and reporting around ESG, it's been a big push that it doesn't matter how successful you are, you still need to do reporting, either to the state or the municipality or to your LPs. And that's exactly what Matthew talked about in that presentation 6 years ago, is that the increasing demand from LPs to be able to look into the very, very nitty-gritty details of your portfolio in order for themselves to do a risk assignment. Not just taking that risk assignment you as a fund is doing or someone on behalf of but actually do their own risk assessment. So download the entire rent roll for the entire portfolio and start kicking around the numbers and see where are the properties, what type of properties, where are they located, age, standard, and so on. And that's
So on that, you and I have sort of discussed away from sort of publicly. So I've obviously I'm moving into a new position, and the reason for me doing that is very deliberately because of everything that you've just said, which was there are enough. And I've been using the analogy of the carrot and the stick an awful lot in the last 2 months, which was the carrot has not been enough for real estate firms globally to change, which is by understanding your data, you can save money on your energy, you can save money on your carbon offsetting, you can, all of these sorts of carrot aspects. And so what we're now finding is that regulatory and legislative challenges are coming in, which are giving real estate, of owners, you name it, a significant reason to have to understand the data coming in their building. They're going to have to start working with companies to help them on their reporting on ESG standards, because otherwise and I think it was when I was talking to Brendan Wallace at Fifth Wall, he was saying exactly the same thing, which was the amount of fines that the real estate industry is about to have put on these companies is going to be very, very significant. And there's a lot of these owners who are still burying their head in the sand, and it'll only be when the stick comes and whacks them over the back of the head.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you should almost just build tech products on the back of new regulation. That's
exactly that. 100%.
To be honest.
Well, look at all the European legislation at the moment around, and I can never get the initials the right way around. It's CDRS, which is all the ESG regulations coming in now. All the reporting regulations are going to be so significant, but it comes back to one thing, which is there is a lot of data that these companies have. They don't necessarily understand the data that they've got, and they need access to it.
Yeah, it quite quickly becomes a shock for them, because it's not just the parameters needed for that ESG report or energy consumption report. What they quite quickly run into is the fact that, just back that one, I'm over the last 25 years, since we were selling our product to property investors, property owners, I met with thousands and thousands of property owners, investors. I mean, probably most of all the large property funds, including the ones located in the City of London. You take the elevator up 25 plus floors. The reception area is big, like a machine hall, pretty much. And you sit in there and you realize half through the meeting that they hardly know what assets they themselves own. And there is no way they could show me just turning the laptop the other way around and show a map with all the assets they own and stuff like that. The only way to produce a report for them is to send it back probably 10 floors down to a handful of MBAs sitting crunching the numbers overnight, and they will have a PDF report in the morning. Which means that when they start collect data nowadays on energy consumption, they have most probably close to no data infrastructure. What assets do we own? Have we tied that data asset to a database and so on? And what's the unique keys in this project and so on? To actually take another data set, check it into the database and create a report on back of it. It's just totally, there's nothing there. And that's like building the 7th floor of something where you haven't built the first 6 and the foundation of building the 7th floor. So the first report is a nightmare. The second report is much, much easier, because then you have the infrastructure. You have a system that holds the basic data for you to actually tie new data sets to it. And that's a big, big challenge. I mean, another one that never surprised. If I go into a meeting and meet a property investor that could quickly show me all their portfolio, where it's located, what type and so on, a few dashboards, I would be super impressed. Obviously, there are nowadays, but up until for 5 years ago, it was very rare. The other thing is that it's never will never stop me be surprised how many C-levels are talking about their internal data is stored in databases. And then 5 meetings later on, when you were supposed to build an API to collect the data and upload the data, you realize it's just a handful of spreadsheets.
So just, I mean, on that, in terms of the geographical side, I mean, obviously, I know you've spent an awful lot of time in the Nordics, and but I'm interested in whether or not that is.
I probably spent more awful time in the UK, to be honest.
Well,
when it comes to data.
Well, that was my.
Sweden was the easy target, man.
But my question really is what, if any, geographical variation have you seen in that attitude, or is it we, as in the Western democracies, are in a better place or a worse case than anyone else? Because I've seen situations in, for example, South America, and I'm looking at the understanding of their assets, and I'm thinking they may be worse than what we have.
I mean, I probably looked into land registers, data from land registers and so on for maybe 20 different countries, but all of those have been Europe and North America, to be honest. Yeah. I haven't looked into South America or even southern part of Europe, pretty much. And obviously it differs a lot. And it also comes with, I mean, it comes with so many different aspects here. Is the way you conduct business, how the society looks at structure and collecting data for taxation and so on. But just one quick note there. For example, one of the more advanced land registers I've seen is actually in the Baltics, in some of the Baltic countries. And the reason for that is quite simple if you think about it, because they pretty much had nothing until in the 80s, and then they rebuilt everything from scratch. So they have no legacy. I mean, in Sweden, we have our land reg is pretty much twice as old as the land register of England. Just to give you a perspective, because we kind of, I wouldn't say love taxes, but we pay our part of the game to have a society we like up here, and taxing to actually being able to track the property tax and what you shouldn't have. They started already in the 1600 to create a property land register, and from there. And when it comes to the different land registers, it's a massive difference. I mean, you could buy the basic data for commercial buildings like ownership, size, and so on in Sweden since probably the mid 1980s, I would guess. That was way before I started acquiring those kind of data sets. It took us 5 years to convince the Land Reg of England to actually sell the data so we could build a Dutch product in England. It took us 5 years to convince them. And because we wanted to buy bulk, which means a large data export, so we could, not entire data, but some of the parameters for the commercial real estate, commercial properties in England, because we wanted that data in our database in order to make it super quick to do searches and aggregations and so on. There is just a certain length of the depth you can do in the product if you just only have API calls. I love API calls, but it doesn't solve everything. It differs so much between different countries. I mean, Dutch never launched in Germany because up until, I don't know nowadays, but until I left in 2019, you were not able, as far as we're concerned, to actually acquire that type of data from the German land register. You could do it in Holland, for example, but it was quite expensive. I was super surprised, I mean, being from Sweden, when we started looking into France. We thought it should be much more paper-based, but apparently it was digitalized. Data was available to purchase. The property borders, the polygons were quite expensive, but it was pretty straightforward. But we thought that England was a bigger market, so that's why we went for England. And I think it paid off greatly. So we're not.
Yeah, I think it probably did. I mean, there's an interesting commentary there, though, isn't it, about, in particularly, land registries, in the sense of, you've got your Swedens and you've got the UKs, which have got a very traditional, centralized, paper-based land registry, which obviously is slowly digitalized yet, but it's digitizing. And then you've got some markets, in particular the Africas, where the land registry, they don't have any organization. They don't have any. I'm sweepingly generalizing here, but there are some countries which are going to a digital first type land registry, but then there are challenges with that in the sense of how do you validate the first proper decentralized land registry using let's take a blockchain based scenario. And it was something that I remember years ago people were saying how wonderful it would be that you can go straight to a blockchain based decentralized, which is immutable and it's not hackable and nobody can dispute that land is that person's. And I used to say to people, well, that's fine, but how do you validate the first ownership of that piece of land?
Exactly. I mean, it's not a tech problem. I love the blockchain technology, but it's normally not the case. I don't really care about if the Swedish land reg is using Oracle or blockchain or SQL database. It comes to trust, and that's you either trust society or not. I think blockchain could be a perfect use case for land register to use internally, but as an end user, you either trust or you don't trust. It's pretty black and white. And the very first time you should create a land register, it's much more than a tech problem. is to understand, okay, what's the borders of this property and who is the ownership and how do you prove that one?
Without fail, a lot of people seem to gloss over that fact and they just look at the tech solution, not the societal problem around that. But I agree with you. I mean, I've long been
back in Sweden, it went on for hundreds of years to start creating that first version of that database.
Let's move on from that sort of land reg side. I want to go back one step because you talked about using both public and private data sets previously, and you've built products on the top of that. How have you found the difference between both public and private data sets? Do they suffer the same challenges, or are they relatively identical in the way that they're built and structured and organized, or how would you say that they're different? And I don't know if that's the right question, but I mean,
there are many different ways to see that question. In a way, it's different between private and private. I mean, when we acquire a data set from a private data supplier, the data quality, I mean, that's their product. They understand data. They quite obviously will have a better, more straightforward way to bring that data to life in a product like that. So if you start to work with the clients to upload their own data into the system, it's mostly much more of a challenge because they don't have the basic understanding of data sets and the quality you need. It can't just be text-based and you can write whatever you want. If everyone is doing it the exactly correct way and you don't misspell, for example, the name of the city or the name of the street, then it's perfect. But if you try to help a client upload the data, it's much more of a challenge than if you acquire the data or do a deal with, let's say, like we did that's not a private company, but you understand. I mean, someone who resells business data from company's house, it's their product to understand data and resell it. So it's much more straightforward. But to have clients uploading data it makes a lot of sense, but it can be quite challenging. It goes back to those meetings. Do you have an API so we can connect my databases? The client may say, and then 5 meetings later, close to 5 years later, you realize that they don't have a database. They have Excel spreadsheets, and they have 4 different versions, and the data quality is questionable.
Yeah, I remember very clearly though your point about getting customers to upload their own data. I mean, that's what we did with Unisu. Self-policing, and it meant they had an incentive to make sure that the data about them was right. But didn't mean that the upload was right. It didn't mean that it was done in the right way. So it was challenging.
And it quickly becomes your problem because the client doesn't get the value out of the product, and it's not that you have done anything wrong. You push yourself to help them as much as possible in creating an upload infrastructure and use cases that very easily, well, to a great extent, tries to help the client do the right thing. But if it doesn't work due to bad data, it still looks like your problem, or the end user won't use the product because there's no data there. So it's a big challenge. There's no question about it.
So moving into the back an element to the sort of strategies that real estate companies should be considering. Do you feel it's important for the leaders of real estate companies today to firstly understand the data that they have, and secondly, should they be employing a data strategy that looks to the future of that organization? So should they understand the data, and should they have a data strategy? Because I get conflicting reports on this.
You were talking about the tech side and the people side early on this call. I would say, in my book, I think there's 3 different pillars. There is the tech side, it's the people side without hesitation. People side is a big thing, but for me, the 3rd pillar would be the strategy to actually start to do a transformation of your business. Mm-hmm. Even before it becomes a people problem, so to say, or people challenge. It's all about the strategy, and quite often I'm surprised how little of the strategy work that is done and that the C-levels really believe in, more than just saying that they want to do something on the tech side or something on that side because they think that's the correct way to do. But there is no strategy pinpointed, and especially there's no budget tied to it. And then they ask themselves, why is there no innovation here? Well, show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome. So it's become quite often only a lip service, and then people are surprised why nothing happens 6 months later. So I think it's super important to start with the strategy, and that comes down to the management team. What type of insights and ownership should I have when it comes to IT or tech in general? And I think a big mistake, if you ask me, is that quite a few firms they put all the tech transformation or digital transformation or those kind of strategies on top of the daily work for the head of IT. And I have absolute all the respect in the world for the head of IT, as long as they let me use MacBooks and Apple products. And that's a tough call for many. And then they ask about why people are not innovative, but that's another story. But the people running the head of IT departments, they are brilliant at what they do. But to set up an IT environment for classical office IT, and then compare that to creating maybe an internal product or strategy or how tech could change the business route of their business, it's for me almost complete opposites. And I have the highest, like I said, remarks for head of IT. I think they're doing a brilliant job. So I think that's the start. So you really need someone who.
Hang on. Just finish on that for me before we go into whether leaders should be data savvy and have a strategy. When it comes to that head of IT, head of technology, why do you feel that is a complete misalignment of focus? Is it because that generally heads of IT, heads of technology have have implemented solutions that they're comfortable with. It may be built in-house, and as a consequence, it's
both our IT, both our tech. So I fully understand why it's so easy to don't see the nuances between those different roles. It's like someone outside of the commercial real estate market. They could say, well, I have a property manager here. Can't you sell my property? Why should I go to a capital markets expert to sell the property? Just property, just the same thing. Why do I need two different kind of titles or positions to do one the daily basis to operate the office building and one to sell it? Well, it's just offices. Why don't the same person do both things? Obviously, we know that the best capital market agent is pretty useless taking care of the property on a daily basis, but really good finding and closing that deal, and the other way around. It's the same with IT and tech. If I fully understand that, okay, something tech, that is head of IT. I never understand what he does anyway, but take care of this. And I for me, being in product and software development for 30 years, it's a massive difference to run your IT infrastructure with laptops and computers and servers and Wi-Fi networks and everything like that, and your user accounts and your set up all the different Microsoft licenses and firewalls and stuff like that. That's a completely different set of capabilities than create a strategy for the tech aspects of your company, and especially building a mobile app or something like that. The entire product management and everything like that is a totally different. I mean, normally head of IT, they don't oversee developers normally. They have more IT infrastructure people and service people, but not developers. So I think that's one issue. So it depends on the size of the company, obviously, but at least hire someone on a consultant basis that have done tech transformation and understands data slightly more, and that could guide you in the process. And then be very clear on the use cases. Why are we doing this? Not just talk about data in a very broad perspective. What's the use cases? Is it to find better off-market deals? Is it to better understand our tenants? Is it to be more efficient internally in our leasing processes? Where should you start? And be very clear on the outputs. And also, as a tip, be very clear what you are not doing. Because if you say something that you should do something, you should do use case X, Y, and Z, everyone will kind of read between the lines what that means for them. So to also be very clear, we're going to do those 5, but also, by the way, we're not going to do those 3. Because then people will realize, oh, you're not doing that one. Shouldn't you do that? Or otherwise people will think that their use cases will be solved in the other 5. And if you be very clear on that will help you save a lot of time in the end. So back to brutal transparency. Don't oversell it. Over deliver. Sorry.
That's a brilliant alarm to say, right, do not be brutally transparent, Magnus. Otherwise my alarm will go off. No, it's it's some really interesting insights. I suppose to finish, really, I'm quite interested in your perspectives, given your long career in the data area. If you were writing a chapter on data specifically within real estate, how would you structure that chapter? What areas do you feel are most important to pick out for the industry to understand and learn from?
That's a very good question, my friend.
It's
First of all, I should very quickly hire a co-writer in Josh from Columbia University.
Are you doing his course at the moment? His
I'm not doing his course, but I love that he's doing it, and
it's good.
I'll give it some input on the
Really good.
agenda and purpose and so on. And he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
I think what is needed out there is courses like him, or different versions of it for different kind of people within the commercial real estate industry. I think it's brilliant. Sometimes you hear people talk about different stuff from stages, and it sounds a bit weird if you know the topic yourself. And there's so many people that kind of try to do a case and misunderstand how data is and what it is and why you shouldn't do it.
I mean, it's interesting. The first couple of modules that he's put out have been all on the understanding of the basics around data.
I mean, I've never written a book more than the Dutch manual, which I'm very proud of. So I'm a writer. But to learn about data, I should quickly start with very basic examples. How data is, when you want to tie data and different data parameters to each other to understand the need for global IDs or identifications so that you could quickly tie them together. That is super important. And to actually make sure that those IDs really reflect the real physical world in a way. So you use the right. I mean, you had Dan on the earlier call.
Which he was talking a lot about, yeah.
Yeah, UPRMs, which I'm slightly. I don't really understand. I love the way that you have an identification for addresses. That's brilliant. Instead of having just a number or the wordings and the spelling, because it's so easy to misspell street name or do abbreviations on the street name. But that was a big topic among quite a few of our users back in the day. We launched Dutch in UK. We didn't really care about UPRNs because we wanted data sets that were tied to the property. So we tried to convince everyone to use the freehold ID, because that's what normally a commercial building is 10 to 100 different addresses. And we want data tied to the freehold, because that's normally what you sell and buy. And that's what we were looking to. So you need to understand the data structure, so you tie the data set to the right ID, so to say.
Yeah.
Because it's no point if I buy different data sources and they all have UPRNs, then I have to figure out, well, that data set actually isn't about the address, it's about the building. And the building has 21 different addresses. So why not tie it directly to the freehold? Obviously, there are data sets that should be tied directly to the addresses. And then UPRN is brilliant. And another thing with UPRNs, it's called unique property reference ID, but it's actually the ID for the address, not the property.
Magnus, so, I'm just gonna move. So just forgive me a second. I'm just gonna go on mute for a sec. Okay.
Cool.
This new world of me having to move around an office, I'm getting used to it. When you get thrown out of one booth and you have to go to another one. So in terms of, let's just sort of wrap this round. The first bit is obviously an understanding of the global IDs and actually some method of.
No, so for that training course, I would start with very basic examples, how you tie data to each other and the problem that will occur if you if you, for example, if you should tie a data set to cities, if you then misspell Paris a number of times, you would not be able to match the data automatically. Or in the old days, I think that's an area where AI in the longer run will make quite a difference, is to take away the need for some of the quality assurance work that the AI will understand that this is a misspelled word, instead of just looking for 100% accuracy when they join in data sets.
Yeah.
So to start with very few very basic examples to start to understand people about data and data sets.
Yeah, it's a good start. It's going to be wide reaching. I mean, the point on where this book's going is it's going to be very much around, the understanding of that element of the transformation, and then actually bringing in case studies to say, and this is what happens if you do this, and this is what happens if you don't do this. Because I think it's, the real estate angle has got to be learning driven and case study driven, so that people actually,
one should always start with the use cases and the benefits of doing it, and then go backwards to the tech solution, and not just start with the other one. I mean, you should do it back and forth, but in the end, quite quickly, you need to come up with a use case that makes sense. But then you shouldn't be afraid of doing something that people don't believe in. I mean, we had those user meetings with Dacia back in the days where the product team was supposed, and we did put up like, okay, we're thinking about doing those 5 different projects, and we described the use cases on a high level and the benefits, and we kind of tried to have the users to vote for what to do and not to do.
Yeah.
What happened was that in 90% of the cases, they absolutely disliked what we were thinking about. It was just a lunatic idea. There was nothing, no one would use this. You will never be able to do it. Luckily, we had an owner that were there for the long term. So in most of the cases, we just said, screw that. We strongly believe this is the way they should work in 5 years. And we built it. And a year later, we started to release the products, and tough first year, tough second year, but then they started using it, and then 5 years later they loved it.
I bet.
So you shouldn't listen too much to the client. You should understand the client, and that's a big difference. That's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree.
You should really understand what is their problem, not just go out there with a notebook and write down what they want.
But that speaks to the challenge of the innovator's dilemma, because there's a difference between listening to customers, because if you listen to customers, you will build what they are asking you to build. And then ironically, the same reason you fail is because you listen to customers and what they wanted to build, rather than understand their role, understand their motivations, understanding their job, and you build to that, not listening to everything that they want. Because
the caveat on that one is to fix bugs and small improvements. Then you should really listen to the client. But for the bigger shots, which probably should be half your product roadmap, then it's down to really understanding, okay, what will happen in our business and what tech will be available, what is the underlying need of the client, and try to triangulate what will the market be in 3 to 5 years. And it's damn hard. It takes a lot of time and a lot of client meetings, but it's not to just go there with a notepad and write down the first 20 things they say, because that's not necessarily what you should do. But there's a balance there.
It is, but I'm just going to quickly, just because obviously your ego needs a bit of stroking. Mike is saying, excellent point, Magnus. Thanks, Mike. Good to hear you. And Patrick, good old Pat. Hi, Pat. Here we go. He said, the consultant's dilemma. Here we go. It's coming in. But anyway, look, Magnus, I think we must end, because I've taken up too much of your time anyway. I'm sure there's going to be some other questions around that data side and making it all together. But just publicly, thanks so much for your time. And I'm just going to end the live element of this, and I'm going to bring you back into the green room.